So we're going to have a look at question 3 now from Language Paper 1, Section A. This is basically a structural analysis question. So in some ways it's similar to question 2, and in other ways it's different. So we're going to look at it in reference to question 2 and what you know about that already, and how this one can kind of build off the skills that you learned in question 2, but also how it needs some slightly different touches as well. So the first thing is it's the whole of the source. Question 2 is looking at a section that they give you in a box. Question 3 is everything. So you look at the whole of the source. It tells you where the text is from. So in this case, the middle of a short story. It might be the opening, might be the ending. Use that piece of information to go deeper into your analysis of the structure. If it's the opening, it's going to be establishing certain things. It's going to be introducing some ideas. If it's the ending, it might be delivering messages or having a final comment about something, or there might be a twist or a revelation. So you want to think structurally about the shape of the story and how writers shape texts to reveal things to readers in a very specific and controlled way. It's quite a shape-based question, whereas the other one is more of a language-based question. It's still 8 marks, and you still want to write kind of 2 to 3 PEE paragraphs. But the techniques you look at are not language features, they're structural techniques. If you need a list of structural techniques, there's one available for free on the Scribbly blog, so you can just kind of type in, Google something like structural features Scribbly or something like that, and it should come up with a giant list that I made of all the techniques that you want to talk about here. And it gives you direction, what to speak about. So do follow that direction, especially when it's talking about focal points. So here you can see it says, what does it focus your attention on at the beginning? How does it change focus? Anything else that interests you? So we're going to look at a full mark answer. And it's from The Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury, so a different paper. I try and use like a huge range of papers when I'm going through this course so that it gets you used to seeing the similarities of the questions across time, because even though you don't know what your extract's going to be, you can pretty much predict what your questions are going to be to an extent. And you can definitely figure out how to structure and approach the question because it's very similar each year that it comes out or each time that the paper is made. So yeah, here we've got a link. If you want to download this from the Scribbly page, you can have a look at the, I don't know what happened here. It's gone link to insert. It's got giant little, yeah, I don't know why it's doing that, sorry. Sometimes documents get the better of me. So yeah, link to insert in a really long extended way, and then link to mark scheme. So you can look through those if you want before the rest of this lesson, if you want to kind of read the extract or get used to the mark scheme or anything like that. If you're ready to move on, we'll have a look at the answer. So I want you to pause me and read this first paragraph aloud. I've put in bold what the structural features are there. So you might want to jot down or make a note of those structural features. But as well as the features, I want you to look at the effects, because the effects of the feature is the most important thing. That's what you get most of your marks for. So you do need to have techniques there, but beyond the techniques, the thing that gets you the most marks is the analysis, the thinking behind why did they use that technique, what is the effect and reason for that technique. So yeah, pause me, read the first paragraph, write down anything that you know. So it's got a sensitivity to atmosphere, stifling atmosphere, but it's tying that into the fact that this is kind of an opening of the text. It's understanding grammatical structuring. So that's a very precise thing to think of if you know your grammar and you can see the grammar repeating. It's a technique called parallelism, and it's quite clear structuring that you can pick up on. So here it says the jungle was high and the jungle was broad. So it's using that same structuring. The only thing that changes is high versus broad. The adjective changes. And the effect of that is monotony. It's creating a kind of boring opening, not what we would expect for an exciting story. The reason why is because the character seems overconfident. They've seen it all before, they're used to it. So they will create this sense of monotony and boredom because it's a familiar scene, it's something that they feel very confident about. And then that gets disrupted later on. So you can see how the structure starts off setting up an expectation that then gets confused or destroyed later on. So it seems as though the T-Rex is going to just be one more creature that this guy's hunted. He's hunted a million things before. The jungle is like any jungle that he's been to. So I want you to read the next paragraph. It's important with your question that your paragraphs actually flow from one another more in this question 3 than they do in the question 2. Question 2 can be about different topics, whereas this one, because you're looking at the shape of the whole text, you should actually use some kind of flowing structure where it's like, this is what we think at the beginning. This is how the focus shifts or how our understanding shifts towards the middle or the end, that kind of thing. So sentence structure is always a really good thing to pick up on. Everything has sentences. So if you get used to analyzing sentences, whatever text you're given, there's going to be sentences there. So that's always a really kind of surefire way to get a good mark if you're confident on sentence analysis. So here we have short, simple sentences. Silence, a sound of thunder. That is tense. It creates dramatic tension. And there's a climactic moment in this story. So if it's in the middle, you might find a climax or a climactic moment there. This is a moment where the hunter gets attacked by his prey, by the T-Rex. And the hunter loses his nerve, so he's very confident. It's almost boring at the beginning. Suddenly, he's in this moment where it's very frightening, and he gets lunged at and attacked by a giant T-Rex. And at that point where it's a climax, it becomes longer and slower, the pace of reading. The detail is greater, so it slows everything down. Sorry, this should be actually in bold. Slows down the pace of reading when everything's being described in detail. When things are described quickly in short, simple sentences, it speeds up the action. So you want to think about the speed of reading. Is everything slowing down because it's a tense moment? Or is it all speeding up because it's action-packed and it's quick? And it ends with a single sentence paragraph. And I actually quoted the whole thing here. Like a stone idol, like a mountain avalanche, Tyrannosaurus fell. And it's got a double simile. That's not the best thing to analyze there, to be honest, because it's a language feature rather than a structural feature, but it's tied to the idea that this is just a single sentence paragraph. If there is a paragraph that you're given that is just one line, it's definitely a good thing to pick up on. You can think, why did they just make that paragraph so short? What is the point or the effect of that? So hopefully that's given you an idea of what to do with a structural question. You can write 2 or 3 middle paragraphs depending on how long they are and how much you can manage to say. The structural features, so these are kind of just notes from the mark scheme that I'm going to use to reinforce the marking of what we did there. So one thing that they want is understanding the whole text level, like the beginning, ending, shift in focus or perspective. They also want paragraph level, topic, changes or aspects of cohesion. And they also want sentence level, when the sentence contributes to the whole structure. So for a high mark, you have to get all 3 levels in there. You don't just want the whole text level. You don't just want the sentence level. You want a sense of structural features across the whole, across a paragraph, and across a sentence. And all the time thinking about the overall meaning and the overall messages and effects that are going on. If you do that, that shows something called part to whole analysis, and that's what all exams really in English will look for a high grade example. They look for that in literature as well as language, part to whole analysis. They want you to select judicious examples. This is one of the hardest things. Judicious means really appropriate examples. So there's a lot you can choose and talk about in these questions in this paper. And the only things that you should really choose are things that are ambitious. So you've got a lot to say about them. They may be kind of complex or interesting. They've got a lot of weight to them that you can pick apart and talk about. And things that really relate to the question, so structural stuff, which is why I said when I was talking about the simile, it wasn't the best part of my answer because it was going off structure into language a little bit. So your structural features are super important, and anything you choose as evidence also needs to be structural evidence. If you're quoting the whole text, or if you're referencing the whole text, or a paragraph, definitely don't use a quote there. Only use quotations when you're doing small things like a single sentence or part of a sentence. So you can use a reference rather than a quote if you need to do something bigger. And we've got some examiner comments. These are basically my own comments on my own answer. But I just sort of put them here so that you can see how an examiner would think about the way that question is structured. There's not perfect parts to this. So after I wrote it, I did write it in time conditions, and I thought maybe I could have organized it a little bit better. Maybe I could have looked a bit more at focal points and shifts in focus. But there's enough there for it to be a full mark answer. So a full mark answer is not a perfect answer in this exam. They just want enough that they can give you a high grade. So they want to see that your brain works on a good level, that you have thought deeply about the text, and that you know how to structure your response. And if you can do that, you'll get your full marks. You don't have to be totally perfect every time, especially when time conditions are included. So there's a few more example answers here. I want you to spend a bit of time looking at these and kind of analysing them. If you want, you can get the mark scheme up and cross-reference against the mark scheme and try and figure out why did it get that mark. These are student examples. So one student here received 6 out of 8. They've got a lot of intelligence and sensitivity, but they're maybe not structuring as well as they could. They're sort of just listing structural features and quickly analysing and moving on. And then this one is a more developed structural answer that is probably better structured, I think, than the T-Rex one that we looked at. So have a look through those. Try and highlight or underline things that you think are important. Especially pay attention to the way that they analyze the structure and what types of things they say. And once you've done that and looked again at the first example, you should feel quite confident on this question and ready to try an answer. This is one that a lot of people struggle with, so if you find it one of the harder questions on the paper, you're not alone. The main thing you want to be doing is making sure that you understand your list of features first and you understand why writers choose to use those features, and that will give you a good basis for writing a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs in this answer. So yeah, hopefully that's useful for you and you feel more confident on everything. And hopefully you feel a lot more kind of sure about what structure is and how to analyze structure. And also, if you're aiming for a really high grade, that sense of what part to whole means as well. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys in a future lesson.